All right, let's talk about the adapter design pattern. And hopefully, this will be an easy one to understand because you already know what an adapter is. Here, I'll give you two quick examples. One, imagine that you have a digital camera that saves photos to some kind of proprietary storage card. Now, the problem is you want to get the pictures off of that memory card and onto your computer. However, there's no interface to do that. There's no way to plug the memory card into your particular computer. So, what do we do in those situations? And you already know the answer. You use an adapter. You buy an adapter that you plug your memory card into, and then the adapter offers a USB port that you plug into your computer. And that's exactly what an adapter is. Or another common example, I am based in the United States, so that means my plugs are 3-prong. However, when I travel to Europe, my plugs no longer fit. So once again, what do? Well, once again, we have to buy an adapter to make these two different interfaces connect. So hopefully that makes sense. The basic definition is this. An adapter allows us to convert or translate one interface to another. And it doesn't get much more complicated than that. So why don't we do this? I'm going to give you a code demonstration, and then we will review some actual real-world implementations of this pattern. Here we have mostly an empty directory. The only thing I've done is set up autoloading. No other classes have been created. So let's imagine that we have a book. This is my favorite illustration of the adapter pattern, so I think it'll help. Let's go ahead and create that class, book, and the namespace will be Acme. Okay, so to consume a book, we need to open it first, and I will just represent that with a var dump. So opening the paper book. And then next, you need to turn the page. So we will add a method, turn page, turning the page of the paper book. All right, and for our purposes, that's great. So now I just want to consume this class. So let's create a new file, and why don't we call it just index.php. And maybe within here, we'll have something like a person class, and a person needs to be able to read. So we will give the person a book, and they will simply open it, and then turn the page. And that'll do it. So now let's try it out. I will new up the person and tell them to read a new book, which we will import at the top, use book, and then also we need to pull in the autoloader. So require vendor/autoload.php. So if I switch over, sure enough, we got this down, no problem whatsoever. So everything's going great, but now we're starting to see more and more people using e-readers. And the problem is the interface for an e-reader, like a Kindle, is not the same as one for a paper book. So for example, if I'm using a Kindle, well, I don't open a Kindle and I don't turn a page. Instead, I turn on the Kindle and then maybe I click a button to turn the page. So already we can see I want to use both, but the interfaces don't match. Well, it seems to me that an adapter will fix all of this for us. And once again, to give you the definition, an adapter allows us to translate or wrap one interface for use with another. So let's see what that might look like. However, the first thing I'm going to do is extract an interface here. So I will call this book interface, and that looks good. So now back in index.php, rather than just hoping that the book adheres to our contract, and also rather than locking it to a specific concrete implementation, instead, I'm just going to say I need some kind of implementation of this contract. So I will type hint the interface. And now we've decoupled our code. However, if we switch back and refresh, it's still going to work just as it did before. Okay, good deal. So now let's set up our new class. This one will be a Kindle. And remember, imagine that this class right here is not owned by you. Maybe it's from some package that you're pulling in. So the interfaces don't match. Remember that. Let's say that the interface is, well, we have to turn it on, and then we also have to turn the page. So that would be press next button. How about that? And then why don't we go ahead and extract an interface? This time it will be e-reader interface. How about that? All right, so if we switch back, this time we will represent that with turn the Kindle on. And then down here, press the next button on the Kindle. Okay, so we've pulled this class in, and we want our person to be able to read a Kindle. However, right now, if we were to try it, new Kindle, and by the way, do note that it got imported up here. Anyhow, if we try to run this in the browser, crap, it's not going to work because the interface that we're using here does not match the interface that we wish to use. So really what we want to do now is find a way to wrap this up by creating an adapter so that we can still reference the methods that were defined in our book interface. However, behind the scenes, those will translate over nicely to the e-reader interface. So once again, we're creating a class to allow two different interfaces to communicate. Let's see how that might work. I'm going to create a new class here, and I will call this Kindle Adapter. Now, here's the key thing here. We want to make sure that this implements the interface that we're trying to adhere to. So implements book interface. So let's go ahead and add these method stubs. And now we just want to translate these methods over to what we use in this version. So it sounds like we need to inject our actual Kindle here. So Kindle, initialize the fields, and we'll get rid of the doc blocks for now. All right, so now to map open over to turn on, all I have to do is say return this Kindle turn on. And that's it. Our adapter is in place. Next, to turn the page, once again, I will call press next button. So now, essentially, we've normalized the interfaces. Now, a quick recap. The key component is to create an adapter and have it implement the interface that you're trying to, well, adapt. Then you inject your class and then translate the original interface's methods over to the new one. And I think that should do it. So let's go ahead and try this out. Remember, let's go back and say we're going to read a new book. So if we try that, give it a refresh, we're reading the book. But now I want them to read a Kindle. So we will new up the Kindle adapter and then pass into it our Kindle object. And that's it. So I switch back to the browser and give it a refresh. And just like that, our person is now able to consume a format that wasn't originally supported. And also, pay attention to the fact that we didn't have to change our client code one bit. Understanding that is key. So once again, to wrap this up, Kindle does not adhere to the same contract as we expect. So to fix this, we wrap up Kindle in an adapter and then pass that to the read method. So does that make sense? I hope it does. And remember, in this case, we're just assuming that we have a Kindle, but maybe you have multiple e-readers. Well, if that's the case, then it would make good sense to change this out from Kindle adapter to any kind of e-reader that supports this interface, and we'll assume that all of them do. So I will rename this to e-reader adapter. And then rather than expecting a Kindle specifically, I just want anything that supports the e-reader interface. And then we can update all of these Kindle references like so. Now, with this method, it's a lot more flexible. For example, we have our Kindle, but now let's create a new one, and this will be, how about a Nook? And I'll just update some of this, turn the Nook on, and hopefully you get the basic idea. Now, back within index.php, we want our person to read the Nook. And very quickly, we'll switch back to make sure that works, refresh, and there we go. Now our person is reading a Nook. All right, so that does it for this example. Next, I'd like to show you an example from the wild. So to do that, I'm going to switch out from this simple project and over to the Laravel framework. Let's take a look at a class called File System Adapter. Now, this is actually new to Laravel 5.0. What it's doing is it's wrapping the popular Fly System API into an interface that Laravel users will be familiar with. So let me show you. Notice these methods that you've probably used if you've ever used the file facade in Laravel. So things like exists, or get, or put, or delete, or append. All of these methods that you've likely been using for a long time in your Laravel projects. However, now we have an option to, by using Fly System, leverage multiple file systems, like with Dropbox or Amazon. Now, if we want the API to be as similar as possible, meaning that you continue to use these methods you're already familiar with, however, have them wrap a different interface that doesn't belong to us, in this case the Fly System API, well, an adapter allows us to do that, and that's specifically what this class is. So as an example, let's see for get. So if we want to fetch a file, whether it's on Amazon or Dropbox or something else, well, we continue to use the API we know, get. However, within here, notice that it's actually mapping that to the read method. And the same would be true, how about for the exists method? So if you want to see if a file on S3 exists, then you call this method. However, once again, that's going to be mapped to a has method on the driver. And this file system interface, that's actually part of Fly System. We don't own it. So we don't have the luxury of just updating all of those methods to fit what we need. So instead, and in conclusion, we create an adapter to wrap it and translate that interface over to one that we are using.